Heaven sent.
It's no secret that the gaming industry is one that is constantly evolving. Throughout its storied evolution, we've bared witness to a wide variety of concepts and contraptions, all with the intention of becoming the next big thing. Now, as with anything in life, you win some and you'll lose a lot. But in the case of failures within the gaming industry, the 2000s were without a doubt a hotbed for such creations. From bizarre peripherals, failed services, and a never-ending supply of poor game design, the 2000s offered plenty of failures for us to look back on, and in this video, we'll be doing just that. So if you're new around here, feel free to join us as we take another trip back to the golden age of gaming. And if you're a returning viewer, then you already know the drill. So without further ado, let's prepare to suit up for some stankalicious nostalgia in our list of failures in gaming, 2000s edition. Going back to the more primitive days in gaming, the 1985 North American release of the NES was truly the beginning of the console craze. Up until this point, the majority of players were getting their fix at local arcades, but with the NES broadening the possibility for in-home gaming, we began to see a lot more of players making consoles their primary focus. And with the rise in popularity for console gaming, so began a unique variety of gaming peripherals. For example, we had the Power Glove, a device that when worn by the player was meant to simulate their arm movements in game, making titles such as Mike Tyson's Punch-Out far more immersive. If the glove were able to deliver on its promise, that is. And for example, who could forget the Konami Laser Scope, a light gun peripheral that was meant to be worn on the head of the player, and for those wanting to live out their fantasies of being a RoboCop in the 80s, what better way to do so than over a couple of rounds of Duck Hunt. Now, it's not to say that these were great peripherals in any facet, quite the opposite, but items such as these were only a precursor to what strange contraptions we will be seeing later on down the line. So moving things a couple of decades into the future, the 6th generation of consoles were hot on the market, with online gaming, higher frame rates, and stunning visuals all becoming commonplace in the realms of console gaming. And with so many advancements being made for gaming in its time, you already know the industry itself was booming. With such a profitable time for gaming, it was only a matter of time until all the weird peripherals started coming around. And boy did they ever. And after a bit of digging, I decided to compile a small list of some of the more stupid ones. So for the first chapter of this video, let's take a look at some of the strangest peripherals of all time. Now presenting the Thrustmaster Fighting Arena. Yeah, that's the actual name. And you'd be surprised to hear that this wasn't a DVD series that could be found at your local smut shop. The Thrustmaster Fighting Arena was an ambitious piece of shit. Piece of tech for its time. It was essentially a mat in which you would stand in the center of, with 2 separate poles being placed on each corresponding side of the player. The poles were built with an infrared system that was meant to detect the movements of its players, meaning your punches and kicks would be picked up in real time and simulated on screen. But as with most virtual reality-esque tech of this era, the results were lackluster at best. Just take a look at this video.
Interactive gaming is taken to a new level with this next product. Ray Weigel is here from our labs to demonstrate a fighting arena that really gets you into the game. This is amazing.
This is a pretty cool thing. It just came out yesterday. It is the Thrustmaster Fighting Arena. I brought Tekken 3.
Okay.
The granddaddy of all PlayStation fighting games. And I'm going to let you get on here and check it out. And the idea is, and you can just go start fighting.
Okay.
Yeah. The idea is that
and
the movements you make as you break the different beams of light will correspond to the movements on the screen.
How come it's not punching? What's that mean?
Well, it takes a little while to learn.
Now, as you can see, it didn't work very well. And upon further inspection of this device, you gotta wonder how they expected this to be successful at all. So of course they went on to create even more trash peripherals that were destined to reside in the bargain bin. But with the release of the Thrustmaster Freestyle board, they were back at it again with their subpar antics. So the concept was simple. 2 buttons were placed on top of the board, acting as the up and down buttons on the D-pad, as well as the player being able to sway from left to right for some directional effect. A small remote-style controller was also connected to the board, allowing you to press the shape buttons of your controller, which in theory would have been a fun time, but in practice was literal landfill.
Garbage.
Using YouTuber Game Dave's video for reference here, you can see the controller is less than capable of smooth handling. I mean, you'd probably have better luck with sitting on the controller and flexing your butt cheeks, rather than trying to fool around with this contraption. But that's not to say it wasn't a good idea. I just think the technology was a bit too primitive in what they were trying to achieve. But that's enough hating on the good folks at Thrustmaster, as they weren't the only ones guilty of such crimes on gaming. Whenever it comes down to companies trying to intermingle gaming and physical fitness, it's rare that the result is ever anything less than comical. So when it came down to me discovering the PC Gamer Bike controller, all I could do was furrow my brow and politely sigh to myself. I'm sure you guys have seen those quirky little exercise bikes that some people ride in their offices, or maybe you've even used one. This was essentially that, but with a USB attachment for your PC, giving its players the ability to control their in-game characters by pedaling, and was primarily marketed towards fans of the MMO genre.
Hold on! I'm almost at Stranglethorn Vale!
Now, I'm not one to rain on anyone's parade of trying to better themselves, but this one is just plain silly. I mean, on one hand, it could be a great alternative for anyone without access to a gym or any real biking equipment, but I just don't see it being mechanically viable for players who want to use it. Can you imagine running a raid on World of Warcraft with somebody trying to use this thing? It's hard enough to keep up with all the hotkeys as it is. And with a $180 price tag, sheesh, you could get an actual bicycle for that. Now, despite my gripes, the bike had actually won an award at the 2007 Consumer Electronics Show for innovations, design, and engineering. And although I have to give them credit for trying to uplift the gaming community with physical well-being, we've seen time and time again how that usually pans out. I mean, have you ever walked into a Goodwill and noticed the staggering amount of Wii Fit boards? They just can't get rid of those things. But regardless, we've got another piece of plastic hell I want to attend to. So let's get to it. The history of handheld gaming is one that dates all the way back to 1979, with the release of the Microvision. And it was consoles like these that set the standard for what was to come in Nintendo's near future. Just a decade later, the Game Boy made its debut on store shelves, and the official handheld craze began to run its course. Now, any of my fellow 90s survivors can attest to this, and I'm sure you all remember how prevalent the use of a Game Boy was in everyday life. And with the steady rise in popularity of the Pokemon series, it only fueled the fire of handheld gaming even further. But Nintendo weren't the only ones looking to shape the handheld industry, as cell phones were becoming more popular than ever before. With the majority of citizens looking to get their hands on both, the brainiacs at Nokia were looking to satiate these cravings with a device that could do it all. A one-stop shop for text, calling, and 3D gaming, as well as online multiplayer for those looking for some ponage on the go. And on October 7th, 2003, all of these concepts were brought to life in the form of the Nokia N-Gage. Now, upon first glance at this device, you'll probably recognize its cantina-smitten appearance, or for lack of a better word, it looks like a taco. And while tacos are a Tuesday favorite, a phone shaped like one isn't the most practical of choices. A lot of consumers and critics reported that because of this design, the games were uncomfortable to play. And making matters even worse, if you wanted to answer a call, the speakers were built into the side, meaning you would have to stand there holding it like this. And another hang-up in the design of the N-Gage was in the fact that you would have to disassemble the phone to even put a game cartridge in, meaning you would be tasked with removing the back cover, taking out the battery, and inserting a cartridge behind where the battery goes. Which from a critical standpoint, how did they ever think that would be acceptable? But with the N-Gage releasing at a $300 price tag, and the Game Boy Advance, its direct competitor, only costing a third of that price, it was quickly outsold 100-1. Now, following the criticisms of its poor design, Nokia decided a revision of the system would be their best bet, if they were hoping to meet their projected sales, which released less than a year of the original, with the N-Gage QD. Sporting a slightly more portable design with better button placement and a more suitable slot for inserting cartridges, but rather than keeping all of the original features of the first model, they decided to remove some of their best, getting rid of its MP3 capability, FM radio, and USB connectivity. But with its gaming capabilities being the #1 selling point for the system/phone, the collection of games that were released for it were actually quite impressive. From Splinter Cell, Chaos Theory, Red Faction, and even Tony Hawk's Pro Skater all being included in the roster, as well as a couple of exclusive titles such as Ashen and Pocket Kingdom, which actually came to be pretty well received. But even with an impressive catalog of titles and hasty improvements of the product's design, it just wasn't enough to keep the N-Gage from fading into obscurity. After failing to return a profit and a failed 2.0 launch, the N-Gage and its services were discontinued in 2009, making it one of the most tragic of gaming failures in 2000's history. In my personal opinion, I feel that the design choice of the N-Gage was its biggest enemy, as its features and gaming capabilities were actually quite impressive for its time. But while we're on the subject of poor design choices, I think it's time that we move on to the next topic of our list. So break out the GameCube and get ready to tap away. We've got more weirdness to cover. Now for the last and final peripheral of our list, we have the ACII keyboard controller. There's a lot to unpack with this one. I mean honestly, can you imagine going over to your friends to play some Smash Bros and he hands you this? Yeah, I'd leave too. But as much of an awkward eyesore as this thing may be, it's actually a pretty sought after piece of tech, especially for fans of the Phantasy Star series. Released in Japan on September 12, 2002, the keyboard controller was designed for GameCube players of Phantasy Star Online, an action RPG whose true colors shined in its online play. Now the GameCube was pretty notorious for having little to no care being put into its online features, and as a matter of fact, if it weren't for Phantasy Star, it wouldn't have had any at all. This meant the GameCube enthusiasts were going to have to fork over some extra cash for a broadband adapter if they were hoping to connect their phone box to the World Wide Webs. And with such little online features being offered for Phantasy Star, in-game text chat was all they had to work with. And with the frustration of button typing being the only option up until this thing, I'd probably buy one too. So while the controller was an incredibly strange piece of tech, I can't confidently state it as a failure, as it truly delivered on its purpose. But before we move on to our next subject of gaming, I'd like to touch on a service that I've been wanting to discuss ever since the creation of this channel. So feel free to join me as we continue our journey to the world of gaming's greatest failures. Now we've touched on a good bit of strange gaming peripherals and expensive paperweights. I think it's time for us to move on to a road less traveled. In my youthful years of being a tech TV junkie back in grade school, I had recently began to remember a commercial that I had seen many times before. And while the use of cloud gaming and other wireless play is nothing all too special in present day, back in the early to mid 2000s, it was next to unheard of. So anyway, I'd like to take you guys down a brief trip through memory lane, beginning with this commercial right here.
Gametap.com takes gaming to new levels. Great games at your fingertips. Play for free or go gold and access the entire vault of over 900 games. Kick back and watch Gametap TV, a lineup that pops with music, news, tunes, and game trailers. Dig deeper and read news, reviews, and previews of all the games you want to play. Get it all now at Gametap.com.
So, did that ring a bell for some of you? If not, you're probably wondering, what the hell is Gametap? Well, to put it simply, it was a subscription-based service that offered a wide variety of games for download, much like the Xbox Game Pass or PlayStation Plus. Only with Gametap, the games were emulated through your PC, meaning you could play games from a wide variety of different consoles, such as the Dreamcast, and Television, or even the Commodore 64. Their library also included a decent variety of modern PC titles, and with an initial $14.95 a month price tag, it didn't seem like too awful a deal. The problem was that Gametap was sorely overlooked, and although it was advertised on almost every gaming platform imaginable at that time, it seemed as nothing more than a curiosity for most gamers. So, what happened? Well, beginning with its launch, the service was introduced with a library of over 300 different titles, many of which were retro. But this list quickly began to grow into a more modern selection, giving subscribers even more incentive to keep those monthly payments rolling. But unfortunately, a lot of these games were short-lived on the platform, with the majority of their licensing only having 2-year agreements. And for the platform to be exclusive to PC gamers, a lot of the games they were offering could be easily attained for free, if you catch my drift. By 2007, they revised their subscription model, offering a small selection of free games to visitors, and even more free loot for those who create a profile. The Gold service became the new unlimited pass on the site, and the price was even lowered to roughly $10 a month. But these changes, while in good favor, proved to do little for the company's well-being. By 2008, Turner Broadcasting were looking to sell Gametap, which ended in an acquisition deal with Paris-based company Metaboli, expanding its service to international consumers in hopes of furthering their reach. But once again, the numbers just weren't there, and after a 6-year fight since its new acquisition, the service of Gametap was quietly discontinued in October of 2015. Now looking back on a platform like this, it really is quite puzzling to me as to why it wasn't more successful. I mean, this was a product that was miles ahead of its time, and its users reported virtually no issues with its performance. The interface was said to be incredibly functional and well designed. It gave PC gamers the ability to play games that would otherwise be stuck on certain consoles, and the emulation itself was said to run without a hitch. Now, I personally never got a chance to witness Gametap or even knew anyone that used it, but if I'm not mistaken, services such as these just weren't a thing until the mid-2010s, which is around the time that the company decided to shutter. And it almost makes you wonder how they could have better suited this company to live on. My guess is that console gaming was just more readily available at that time, and not everyone had a decent gaming rig at their disposal. So maybe the PC exclusivity had ruined its chances at a long life, or maybe it was just the wrong time. But at the end of the day, it came, it saw, and it sadly failed. But we gotta give our flowers for its pure ambition, at the very least. So rest in peace, Gametap. May you peacefully sleep in gaming heaven. Well. So far in this list of gaming failures, we've covered everything from inappropriate brand names to Frankenstein-like controllers. So what could be next? Well, how about some actual games? And beginning this list off with one of the most disappointing failures of its time is none other than Daikatana. Daikatana was the love child of an incredibly eccentric game designer by the name of John Romero. Now, it's no secret that id Software had the 90s in a chokehold with a litany of games such as Wolfenstein 3D and, of course, Doom. And with so many successes under their belt, it's safe to say that Mr. Romero here may have possibly gotten a bit too cocky. Around the time of 1996, in the wake of Quake on the PC, John Romero was growing tired of his usual development slog and decided that it was time for him to leave the nest. He began making plans on creating his own company and went around the offices at id, coercing other fellow colleagues to join in on his upcoming business venture. Now, this wasn't taken too kindly by the folks at id, which eventually led to him being let go once they caught wind of his plans. And after packing up his desk full of hair products and medieval weapons, he threw up the deuces and began work on his next big venture. This came in the form of a company called Ion Storm, a name that sounds more like an Xbox exclusive rather than an actual company, and began to lead a small team of familiar programmers down the cold path of development hell. At E3 of '97, John Romero had made the announcement of their first big project, with Daikatana, promising it to be the future of first-person shooters. And after multiple delays in the game's release, outdated software, and of course, the infamous ad campaign that drove away a huge percentage of its fan base, what could have possibly went wrong? Well, my friends, so it would seem that the game was doomed from the very beginning. Going back to the earlier success of Doom and other infamous projects Romero had a hand in creating, a lot of his brilliance was complemented by his former colleague of John Carmack. Whereas Carmack was a more focused programmer with an affinity for coding, Romero was the more creative of the bunch, who was able to help in making the worlds of these games so memorable and atmospheric. In short, Romero was more focused on the look of something rather than how it played, and it planned to make use of the familiar Quake engine in order to save time and resources. The problem was that the engine was becoming more obsolete by the day, and its obsolescence was even further proven anytime they decided to showcase the game. With the game running already 2 years behind its intended release date, they wanted to show it off quick, and planned to showcase it at E3 of '99. But this proved to be a complete failure, with the demonstration running at an embarrassing 12 frames per second, which even back then was a crime against humanity. They decided to once again switch to a newer yet still obsolete engine of Quake 2, hoping this would improve the game's performance and complement the look of it. But despite all efforts in building hype around the project, Mr. Romero decided it was time to release this thing no matter what state it was in. With over $44 million being poured into the game's development, half the staff quitting, and multiple delays in its release, John was beginning to realize he may have gotten ahead of himself. And with his collection of expensive cars and leather jackets beginning to feel as if they could be ripped away at any moment, he pondered a wonderful idea from the top of his decadent penthouse suite.
John Romero's about to make you his bitch.
What? You heard that right, folks. In the wake of the Daikatana Slophouse making its big marketing debut, Mr. Romero decided this was the best way to attract consumers. I mean, all that hairspray must have sprung a leak into his frontal lobe or something. What the hell was he thinking? Suck it down? My goodness. This didn't go over too smooth with his dwindling fan base, and only added more fuel to the dumpster fire that this game had become. And after its unfashionably late release of May 23, 2000, the Daikatana ad campaign had eventually come full circle, after seemingly every critic on Earth had ironically began to make John Romero their bitch. The enemy AI was almost non-existent, frame rate issues plagued the entire experience. For the most part, the game just felt empty. It was a far cry from any of the previous works of Romero, and much of it was to be blamed to his poor management of the game's development. Now, I'm not saying in any way that John Romero isn't an iconic part of gaming history, because he definitely is, but you can't help but to find humor in the entire situation of this game's creation. I mean, it's nothing we haven't seen before, especially in present day, but for what could have been an amazing concept for its time, I guess all we can do now is just laugh at its expense. But Daikatana was in no way the only release to carry such a pungent stink with it, as we've got another round to dive into. So get ready to fire up the grills and bust out the 360. We're taking a little trip to Burger King. "2006 was an incredible year for gaming, with iconic releases such as The Legend of Zelda: Twilight Princess, Gears of War, and the new Super Mario Bros. All being released within the same period. And with the Xbox 360 reigning supreme in the hearts of console gamers at that time, one certain company was looking to cash in on the hype and unload a slew of grease-soaked, chicken fry-loving propaganda for the gaming masses. Ah yes, it's time to talk about the infamous Burger King games. And while these games may have failed from a technical standpoint, they still managed to sell well over 3.2 million copies within a 5-week period. That's pretty impressive. So while the corporate execs at the BK Lounge were wiping their asses with crisp $100 bills, were the players at home getting a reasonable product? Haha, of course not. Beginning with Sneak King, a game in which you play the Burger King himself, on a mission to feed the hungry people of our beautiful nation. Only problem is, he has to be very quiet while doing so, because just one look at that horrifying smile is enough to make anyone lose their appetite. The game offers 4 different locales and 2 different game modes to sluggishly trog through, and will leave players feeling as if they were just hypnotized rather than entertained. Hold up, where are my pants? Yeah, it sucked. It sucked really bad. But what sucks even worse is that they made 2 more games other than this one. So what's next? Patty Flipping Simulator? The Tale of 2 Clogged Toilets? Or maybe Smoking Behind the Dumpster? Nah, try Pocket Bike Racer. It's basically Mario Kart, but bad, and it's racing, but slow. You'll pick from a variety of fast food employees, menu items, and even the famed TV personality Brooke Burke as you race around the Burger King parking lot. When driving in between cones throughout your race, you'll acquire different power-ups, which can either be used as a boost or to slow down your opponents. Problem is, these power-ups have little to no variety, and rather do much in helping your cause. And the rubber banding in this game is just purely savage. The bikes do have a pretty handy slide feature for quickly carving around corners, but the speed at which you're traveling is just ridiculous. I mean, I understand these bikes aren't the fastest, but we play video games to defy reality, not go the speed limit. And with that being pretty much all this game has to offer, it's really all I can say about it. While it is a far more entertaining entry in the Burger King series than our previous topic, the next game on our roster was actually my personal favorite. And if you're a fan of games such as Fusion Frenzy or maybe even Rocket League, then Big Bumpin' may be your cup of tea. It's nothing special from a technical standpoint, but offers some pretty fun gameplay, especially with a group of friends. It's essentially bumper cars, but with a couple of different ideas thrown in to spice things up. My personal favorite being air hockey. It's kind of reminiscent of an online Flash game back in the day, just simple fun, and I even enjoyed the overall aesthetic of the game's look. That's not to say that Big Bumpin' was anything groundbreaking though. It just made the other two games look even worse. But with each of these titles having a $4 price point, they really weren't that bad to be honest. But from a critical standpoint, and as an avid gamer, these games were really nothing more than a novelty. So in the realms of making a legendary mark on the world of gaming, Burger King absolutely failed in that aspect. But we already know that was the least of their worries. Now moving on to our next topic and saving the best for last, I'd like to touch on what may have been the worst release game of the entire 2000s. So prepare to be stunned and have a change of pants on standby. We're not just going off-road, we're going over the road.
Imagine a world where physics bend to your every will, where speed is always a given, and it's even greater in reverse, where the silence of victory is all that you need, because the game didn't come with sound effects. Imagine a world where you're a winner.
Where do I even begin with this game? Well, for starters, let's give a huge shout out to the man responsible in making it, Mr. Sergei Titov, an innovator of technology, a visionary if you will, a man of the people, and the creator of Big Rigs, over-the-road racing. Now, there's a lot to unpack here in the world of Big Rigs, and like a pair of truck stop skivvies after a jerky eating contest, prepare to be blown away, my friends. Beginning with the menu screen, there's no music, no sound effects, no video introducing us into the game's atmosphere, just a selection of game modes and an empty leaderboard. But you know what? That's okay. We don't need all those fancy doohickeys to enjoy our games now, do we? Let's just get right to business and get right behind that wheel, partner. And on your mark, get set, go. Wait a minute. Isn't that supposed to be my opponent? I guess we'll catch up later. Now first off, this game runs absolutely amazing. I don't know if it's just my computer or if the coding is slowly degrading my CPU, but holy shit, this is beautiful. Now one of the best parts of this game is the fact that you can literally drive over and through any obstacle, meaning these pesky houses and steep mountains are no match for my beautiful rig. And you want to know something even cooler? This baby drives even faster
in reverse.
Yeah, that's right, folks. In the world of Big Rigs over the road, laws of motion need not apply, because your truck will stick its way to any surface, and even gain speed uphill or in reverse. You can virtually drive forever into the endless void, and best of all, upon completing a race, you're met with this life-changing message of encouragement to always remember you are a winner. Now that's just beautiful. It only goes to show how out of touch the folks at Metacritic are by giving this game their lowest rating of all time, as it's art like this that can only be appreciated by the most sophisticated of gamers. I mean, they say that life imitates art, but I think that life imitates this game. as the heaven we so longfully seek has been right in front of us this whole time. Now, as much as I wanted to keep a gem like this all to myself, I just couldn't bear the guilt of leaving you guys in the dark about it. So the next time you're feeling down, I suggest taking a nice long look in the mirror, put on your favorite trucker hat, and whisper in confidence, "You're a winner." Well guys, it looks like we've covered just enough dog shit to feed a flower bed. And I don't know about y'all, but I'm worn out. Thank you all so much for watching my video, and if there's any content or games you'd like to see me cover in the future, please drop a comment down below. I've got lots of great ideas in the works and I'm really stoked to show you guys what's on the horizon. But for now, my name is Vincent, take care of yourselves, and I hope to see you all in the next video. Peace out guys.